All right, let's bring in the voice of college football at Fox. It is Joel Klatt, the Klattster. He is calling a Michigan game Saturday. They'll face Maryland. Hey, let me just start with a little Michigan love.
Oh, let's go. Here we go.
Because you and I have overwhelmingly defended Harbaugh.
Oh, yeah, and I take so much grief.
Oh, so
do I. Oh, you love Harbaugh. Okay.
Averages 10 wins a
Guilty
year.
as charged. He's a great coach.
He's won 10 games a year.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Take the COVID year out. So I watched Michigan. And Michigan, since Harbaugh has gotten there, kind of power football like at Stanford.
Sure.
Little 49ers. And that's sort of his DNA. And now I watch him this year, and the quarterback's got an arm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, so I get the vroom. I get the speed, the power. This isn't just an SUV. I got a little sports car to this offense.
When you're at dinner with your famous executive tonight, give that one. Be like, hey, you got a little vroom to your team. You're right. Last year they were built for defense and for running the ball, and their offensive line was really good.
They were built to beat Michigan or Ohio State in bad weather.
And they did. They only had, by the way, they threw the ball in that second half against Ohio State 4 times and won the game. Ran it 20 times because they were owning the line of scrimmage. And to your narrative, you've brought that up about Ohio State and that they needed to get tougher. But this version of Michigan is very different. So they lost both of their coordinators. Josh Gaddis, the offensive coordinator, went down to Michigan with Mario Cristobal. Mike McDonald, who was there for 1 year as a young defensive coordinator that they got from the Ravens, went back to the Ravens, and now he's the Ravens defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
They went from within with a guy like Sharon Moore and Matt Weiss on the offensive side, and then Jesse Minter comes in kind of from that same Baltimore tree. But here's the key part. Their scheme didn't change, but their players have. And they've got much different style of players. They've got more weapons than anyone probably other than Ohio State in college football.
Yeah,
I think it could be a top 3 offense in college football. They're that explosive.
Now you're part of this lame stream media that I'm not part of.
I see. Is that right? Okay.
So you've immediately in your top 10 put Ohio State over Michigan. Michigan beat them the last time they played. Michigan clearly is offensively better, and I don't know if Ohio State...
I don't know if they're clearly offensively better. I mean, C.J. Stroud's thrown 11 touchdowns and no interceptions so far.
No, I said they're better than themselves.
They're better on offense, yes. I see what you're saying. I have Ohio State there because I think that they're correcting issues that were clearly there last year.
All right.
In particular on the defensive side. So I still have them ahead of Michigan.
I got one more thing. I got a little problem with this.
I love it. I love when you got a problem with something.
Okay, I always see glass half full with Oklahoma football. I've said this.
Everybody in Oklahoma just threw up in their Cheerios.
Georgia's the best team I've seen.
Agreed.
Eye test. My dad was an optometrist. Eye test.
I don't know what that has to do with it, but sure. Yeah. Vroom, let's go.
X-ray eyes.
Got it.
Oklahoma's the second best football team I've seen.
That's interesting. That's interesting because I love what I saw last week.
They got power. They got speed. They're better on defense. There is a little edge to Brett Venables that maybe Lincoln, he's a defensive guy.
Yeah.
I test. Hey, by the way.
So let me just dive into that because the key though for Oklahoma is that they're not one-dimensional anymore. So it's not just about the fact that Brent Venables has a good defensive DNA, which is true, and the fact that they have improved on defense, which is true.
They have.
It's the fact that they went out and hired a really good offensive coordinator in Jeff Lebby. He comes from Ole Miss. He was there under Lane Kiffin for 2 years. He was with Dylan Gabriel, their quarterback at UCF 3 years ago, so they reunite, and now all of a sudden you've got a transfer quarterback and a new offensive coordinator, but it feels like they've been working together for 4 or 5 years. And that experience alone, I think, has made them a lot better. And then the last factor that I'll say about OU, they've always been good running the football under Lincoln Riley, but they've taken that up a notch, and I think it's because their defense is getting better. You can't underestimate the fact that teams, when they play against themselves all spring, all fall camp, and then during the week in practice, it's an iron sharpens iron mentality. So the better your offensive line is, the better your defensive line is going to be. The better and tougher your defense is, the better your offense has to be in order to move the ball.
Yeah.
So as they've become more two-dimensional and less one-dimensional, I think that they're a better more suited for championship football team.
Right,
like,
in this
moment.
Is
a team and a blueprint that I think works better in the playoff than what they've had before.
Yeah. By the way, Oklahoma, never forget who's got your back.
Wow.
So my takeaway
is gaslighting. Like
now,
you can just bam. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Of course, all their players come from Lincoln Riley.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Actually, they transferred in most of them because all of Lincoln's guys left, and they're with him at USC.
He's a very attractive coach to play for. So let's go to USC. I am viewed as a little bit – it's unfortunate. I get these labels, and I don't like it at all. So I get this label that I'm pro-USC when I have been saying they're not built right now to beat Utah. They are probably not built to beat Notre Dame. Oh, they lost their quarterback. They may be.
Right.
So, but my takeaway has been Brett Venables inherited 11 wins, momentum, culture. Lincoln Riley inherited a tire fire, and I don't think he can fix both sides of the ball in one class. I think he fixed the offense. I do not think they're good enough defensively to beat an Oklahoma, to beat a Georgia, to beat a Bama, to beat a Michigan, to beat Ohio State. I don't. Do you?
No, I don't. The only defense that they're playing better than in the Pac-12 is Colorado, and that's not saying much. So no, the defense is 11th in the Pac-12 right now, and the only thing that they do well is that they steal possessions for their great offense. So they've gotten 10 turnovers. They haven't turned the ball over. Those 10 turnovers are tops in the country, so they're doing well at that. They're creating havoc plays, but they can't just sit there and stop people. And eventually that may catch up with them because the more pressure that you put on Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley and that entire offense, you can have a bad day on offense like they did last year, by the way. I was in the booth when they had a bad day offensively at Oklahoma against Baylor, and they lost.
Yeah.
And that Baylor team was tough and physical and made things difficult on them. I actually think this week is a really difficult game for USC. They're going to Oregon State. And, Colin, Oregon State is a place that USC historically has had problems with. And Jonathan Smith, Oregon State's head coach, is a really, really good coach. He's going to be mentioned for all of these open jobs, Nebraska, Arizona State. And further, they were 6-0 at home last year.
They got a great
Two of those
O-line.
Wins, Washington and Utah.
Yeah, no, they have two pros on their offensive line and long, excellent corners.
So I think USC could be in a dogfight. They're a 6.5-point favorite. I think that's closer than the 6.5. It's my almost upset of the week, folks. There it is. We finally got to
Let's
it.
go to your top 10. Let's go to your top 10 here. Where, again, I have Georgia 1, Oklahoma 2.
You have Oklahoma 2.
The second best team I've seen. I think they're big, strong, fast, physical.
I still had Ohio State 2, Alabama 3, Michigan 4, then Oklahoma at 5.
Now, let me give you credit. You're very reactionary. But you have Texas at 10.
Yes.
And I thought last week beating a tiny school by 3 touchdowns doesn't sound like anything. But that thing had problems written all over it because they almost beat Bama. And I actually bet plus 12.5 UTSA. I thought, you watch. It's going to be a dogfight. And they hammered them in the second half. I think Sark's got his team. I think this is a real football team. This is awesome for Texas.
And all of a sudden, you look at the Big 12, and everyone was talking about, I don't know if the Big 12 is going to be any good this year. And I think I've got 3 teams in the Big 12 in my top 10 currently, Texas, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma. Oklahoma State's very powerful on offense, and I agree with you. Texas is a team that could very much end up in that Big 12 championship game and potentially even go to the playoff. I just think that they're that good up front, in particular on the defensive side. The one thing I would say, though, Georgia is starting to separate themselves a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And what we saw last week, it reminded me of the conversations that we've had over the past decade, which is it Bama or the field? Remember that conversation? It was like Bama or the field.
That's over.
Now it's Georgia or the field. And, Colin, I got to tell you, I think I might take Georgia over the field right now in college football.
I agree.
And the reason is not because they're more talented than last year, because I actually don't think that they are. I think their mentality changed. And this is something very important in the psyche of a great team's mentality. The fact that they were able to beat Alabama specifically, rather, whether it was a championship game or not. So it's not about winning the national championship per se. It was about beating Alabama. They had not beaten Alabama since 2007. They had lost 7 straight. Georgia was a top 10 team in every one of those 7 games. They thought they were really good, but they didn't know they were really good. Now they know it, and they believe it, and that confidence has taken them to a different place. It's just like 2019. You remember Joe Burrow and LSU beat Alabama on the road that year? And after that, they played totally just to the moon, right? The confidence took way off. That's exactly what's happening with Georgia right now. It wasn't just about winning a national championship. It was about beating Alabama.
And listen, is this Alabama team, that offensive line is okay.
Well,
and the receivers are not.
You always try to drag me into this pit. You try to wrestle me down. You're like a gator in the swamp. It's like I'm walking. It's like I'm taking a walk in Florida, and then there's Colin. He's an alligator, and he's trying to get me into a death roll. I'm not going to do it. I am not going to bury Alabama. I won't do it. He's too good. Saban's too good. They evolve. They've got a quarterback that can put a cape on his back. Like they're going to be fine. They'll play Georgia in the SEC championship game.
I do not think Alabama matches up with Georgia. They do not have receivers that separate. Georgia can go after that offensive line, pin their ears back.
You hear this, Bama fans? I'm not going to do it. I will not repeat mistakes of the past. I said the dumbest thing I've ever said in my life.
What was that?
On this couch, I don't know, what was it, 5-6 years ago? I was like, Alabama's got a Nick Saban problem. How'd that turn out for me? Pretty terrible.
I wouldn't view me as an alligator, more as a big bottle of truth serum.
Big J journalism, truth serum.
All right. So let me go to this. Can I talk a little more about Texas?
Please.
Because here's what's happened. I was very happy today. Can I tell you one of my rants today? I was very happy.
Please.
So I'm a dad. I'm cringy. I have kids. I'm not cool. I'm kind of dorky. I don't know how to dress. Adults in America voted on their favorite NFL players. And religious, God-fearing, optimistic, Russell Wilson, cringy dad jokes won.
Did you see the sound? Runner pass? Runner pass, fellas.
I love it.
I do that with my 5-year-old flag football team.
Love it. I like cringy on the internet because uncool is cool. That's the new rule in America. And you know another thing that's cool? Rooting for Sark. It is so easy to crap on this guy. He had some personal turmoil.
Sure.
We all do. If you're a grown-up, we all do.
Yeah.
His career was in shambles. Nick Saban put his arms around him and said, hey, you deserve a second shot. And now, did you hear Saban's comments when he faced Sark? He came out of that game. I mean, Nick was like, yeah, that's a really good football team.
Yep.
Nick, you use the term, I think it's really smart. Nick, Alabama rarely looks in the mirror. They do with Georgia. I think Texas.
They're starting to.
I think the bumps are. I think this is a real team, man.
He has. I've known Steve Sarkisian for a long time.
Yeah.
Covered him when he was an assistant at USC. I did the games when he was at Washington and built that program. Did the games when he was at USC. I know I've said this, and I'm not afraid to say it publicly. Steve and I have struggled with the same thing. Yeah. I'm 11 years sober now. Mm-hmm. He's sober. And so we've talked a lot about just life together when we sit in an office together. And I respect what he's done in his life. It hasn't always been easy for him.
Right.
He said some things to me a couple weeks ago in our meetings getting ready for that Alabama game that I just found striking. And he talked a lot about two of his best mentors. So his mentors are Lavelle Edwards, who he played for, then Pete Carroll, and then Nick Saban.
Pretty good.
Those are very good.
Yeah.
And all very different, by the way, and eclectic in a lot of ways. But he talked specifically about how Pete and Nick, it didn't happen early for them. And the real success happened after they were 50 years old. Yeah. That's when they took off.
Yeah.
And he said he talked a lot with those guys about the value of experience and the value of authenticity. And one of the things that I think Sark does now better than he did certainly early in his career is he knows himself and he owns it. He knows exactly the type of program he wants to have. He knows the type of coach he wants to be. And that's a powerful thing. And those of you out there like me that have gone through tough things in your life and you get over them, you know much more about yourself. And those trials and tribulations, they produce perseverance. That's a biblical thing. They produce perseverance. And this guy has a totally different perspective on being a head coach and being a leader of this program now versus what he was at USC as a head coach or even as a head coach back at Washington. And it's bleeding into the rest of the program. I talked to you about just feeling different around that program. It's the first time in a decade that it wasn't all about just being back. You know, they were so consumed at Texas and around that program for the better part of a decade with the destination of being back that they weren't focusing on the chase. Nick Saban calls it the chase is better than the capture. And for the first time, I think Steve Sarkisian understands and is comfortable with the chase in his team and in his own personal life. And I think that's what makes him such a good coach right now.
By the way, not this Friday, but the following Friday, I'm doing a little legwork. I'll be at the Washington-UCLA game. We don't have time, and I don't want to be a homer, but Washington found the right coach.
Kalen DeBoer.
That guy
really
is
good.
Really clever.
Really good.
And they got NFL receivers.
Pac-12 all of a sudden really strong, by the way.
What's that?
Pac-12 all of a sudden really strong.
Yeah, I know. So I'm going to do a little legwork, take some notes.
I like that.
Bring it in Wednesday and challenge you because it's a lot of cream puff interviews in your life, not on this show.
That's true. Truth serum and
I'm a big jug of truth serum.
That's it.
You, fearful of me, you have this
there
metaphor
are times
of an
that
alligator.
it feels more like chloroform than truth serum. But
okay.
No?
Say hi to Freddie Couples.
Thank you. I will.
All right.
Freddie, good to see you, bud.
All right, buddy. Good seeing you, my man. Joel Klatt, voice of college football. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.